Okay, good morning. Thank you, David, for the Danishes.
Thank you.
And I wanted to speak about some ideas of Rosh Hashanah today. That was also the request of the Chevra. So we'll do a mixture of Rosh Hashanah Halachos and some Hashkafos, some perspectives, and maybe it could give you some divrei Torah that you could share over the Yom Tovim, wherever you may find yourself. So recently, Rav Shechter spoke at the Kol or Yosef last week, I think it was, something like that. And he spoke about the Tekios Shofar on Rosh Hashanah during the davening, and I wanted to share a few of those points. I don't know if everyone was there, and even if they were there, it was he was speaking very quickly, and he was Kedarko. He's very, very huge Talmid Chacham, and I don't know if everyone followed every part that he said, so I was going to go over a few pieces that he said. So he started off his remarks with the pasuk in Eicha. It says, "Gam ki ezak ve'eshavea sosam tefilasi." That after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, our tefillos had become ineffective. And he said the whole purpose of the Beis Hamikdash was it was a beis tefillah l'chol ha'amim. It was a place of tefillah, and that's what Shlomo HaMelech's tefillos are all about when he built the Beis Hamikdash. So after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it seems to be there is no level of tefillah that we used to have. However, the Gemara in Bava Metzia, Daf Nun Tes, it says that once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it quotes this pasuk in Eicha, Af al pi sheshari tefillah ninalu, even though the gates of tefillos were closed, shari demotz lo ninalu, the gateway of... No, it's fine. I had it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm okay. The gates of tefillos were closed, but the gates of tears are never closed. And Rav Shechter said that the shofar, as we'll soon see, the shofar is this kind of cry, this kind of calling out. That's the essence of the shofar. The Gemara even calls it yavavos, which is a form of a word that the Targum Onkelos translates it as. It's sort of a cry. And we know that this comes from many different areas in the Rosh Hashanah liturgy where we reference this throughout the day. We talk about the Aim Sisra, the mother of Sisra, who the Tosas cites as the reason why we have 100 blasts. But each of the blasts throughout the day correspond to some level of crying. The Gemara says there's 3 Seder Tekios Shalosh al Shalosh. There's 3 by 3. What does that mean? Because we know that we have to hear a trua. It's referred to as a day that is a yom trua. So the core is really, it seems to be the trua sound. But the question is, what is the trua sound? So I'm just summarizing a little bit of the Gemara here, but the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Lamed Gimel, it says that there's 3 sounds. There's 3 different sounds, and each of the truos have to be bracketed by tekiah on either side. And this is why in the end we'll see, this is what the Shulchan Aruch writes. The Shulchan Aruch says that we do really 3 sets of 3, which is really a full total of, we maybe say 27, or we would say 30. But basically, the trua could be 3 different sounds. Either it could be da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then you have a tekiah, and then a trua and a tekiah, and you do, that's one. Then the next one is, it could be what we call shvarim, do. Again, tekiah, shvarim, tekiah. Or it could be a combination of both, which is trua, or shvarim, trua, which is, you could call that 2 sounds or 1 sound, but it's do. So because we have a question of what the actual trua is, and each of the truas need a tekiah on either side, so then you actually would have 9, because you did 1 tekiah, then the middle one, then the latter one. Tekiah, middle one, latter one, tekiah, middle one, latter one, so it would really be 9, or if you count the shvarim and the trua as 2, it would really be 12. So why do we do shalosh al shalosh? Why do we do it 3 times, which gives us a total of 30 kolos, which is the minimum you need to hear, as we'll soon see, as a yachid, as an individual? Why do you have 30, or 3 sets? So Rashi says on the Gemara, he says, why do you need 3? Because all 3 are Achas l'malchios, achas l'zichronos, v'achas l'shofros. Each of those correspond to the tefillah of the Shemona Esrei of the Musaf on Rosh Hashanah, and each of those three sets are blown al seder the brachos of malchios, zichronos, and shofros. It seems like the way Rav Shechter presented this, that Rashi is saying that this is a din d'oraisa, because he's saying that he doesn't quote any asmachtas, he doesn't quote any. He says this is why we have shalosh al shalosh, and this is the requirement mid-d'oraisa of hearing the shofar. The Ramban al Torah, the Ramban says no. He says that he doesn't quote the Gemara on the Rashi on the Gemara. He quotes Rashi on a Chumash, and Rashi on Chumash says the same thing. That Rashi seems to say that it's a d'oraisa, malchios, zichronos, and shofros. And the Ramban says in source number 5, no. He says all of these psukim that are quoted in reference to the shofar are asmachta, which is like a mnemonic device or some. We hang the din and derabanan on a pasuk, but it's really a din derabanan. It's really a rabbinic enactment. And therefore, he says it must be a derabanan. And what's his proof? The Ramban proves this from a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah as well, on Daf Lamed Dalet Amud Beis. What does the Gemara say? It says if a person on Rosh Hashanah has 2 cities to go to, what city? One city has token. They have a shofar. People blow shofar in that city. And the other city, they make the brachos. As explained by the Rishonim, they have a machzer. Not everyone was zocha to have a machzer. They didn't know the tefillos. And one place has the brachos, one place has the shofar. So which one do you do? So the Gemara says, Holchin l'makom shetoken. Go to the place that they have a shofar. And even if they don't have a machzer, that's okay. You hear the shofar, you should listen to the shofar. V'ein holchin l'makom shemevarchin. The Gemara asks the question, Pshita, ha'daraisa v'ha'darabanan. Obviously, I'm going to go hear the shofar over davening. Davening is the Rabbanan, the shofar is the Raisa. I go hear the shofar. So it seems that the Ramban says, you see that it seems to be that the shofar is the Araisa, but the tefillos are the Rabbanan. So how could Rashi, it's sort of like a question that Rav Shechter posed, how could Rashi say, he kind of conflates the two. He says, well, why do you do 3 by 3? Because that's Malchias, Zichronos, and Shofros. Well, one is a Din Araisa, the shofar, and one is a Din Rabbanan. How could you conflate the two? So the Gemara's answer, just to show you what the Gemara says, it's a little bit hard to understand, and Rav Shechter quotes other Mefarshim that explain this a little differently in the view of Rashi, but let's just start with the simple reading of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Lo tzricha, we need the chiddush of the Gemara to tell me that I go to the city that has a shofar, because the afal gav daha vadai v'ha safik. Even if the city has a vadai machzer, and the other city has a suffix shofar, I still go to hear, go to the city that has a suffix shofar. Yeah.
Rashi, I don't know why that, by saying it's Malchios Zichronos and Shofar, why can't that also be Doraisa?
It seems like what he is saying.
But why by saying that it's not Doraisa? What does Rashi say?
Well, Rashi says that the reason why we have 3 sets of 3, like we said, was really 30 blasts, because you really could have 9. Technically, to hear the amount of the tkiyos you need to hear, seemingly from the way we learned the Gemara, we don't really know what a trua is. So that's 3 options, and every trua has to have, the Gemara learns it out from Sukkim, has to have a tekiah before and a tekiah after. So technically speaking, you should be allowed to be yotzi or mitzvah of shofar by hearing 9 blasts, or what maybe call it 12. 1 tekiah, then the trua, and the tekiah, shvarim, tekiah, shvarim, trua, tekiah. 9. Why do you have 3? The Gemara says shalosh al shalosh, 3 sets. Why do you have to have 3 sets of 3? Which is 9, and then we do it 3 times. Why do we do that 3 times? So Rashi says, which is really a total of 30. Rashi says, because that's Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros. Seems to be that means that the requirement to hear 30 blasts comes from the tefillah. You have tefillos, and those tefillos somehow determine when you blow the shofar, but as the Ramban is saying, is why would that make any sense? One was a later enactment. Correct. The tefillah in the Musaf dictates the shofar. So why would that be? Sounds like that. Ramban says it's only the Rabbanan. The tefillos. Ramban says it's the Rabbanan. Ramban says they're only asmachtas. They're only you hang the pasuk, the din Rabbanan on a pasuk, but it's not a din Daraisa. And his proof is the Gemara.
Sorry, God.
No, it's good. It's, if you didn't get it, then probably other people also didn't get it. So the Ramban says it's okay. The Ramban says that the proof how he knows that shofar is Daraisa and tefillah is Rabbanan is the Gemara sets it out almost as there's a suffix or a dilemma. That's the word. There's a dilemma. I have two places I could be for Yantiv. One place has a shofar but no machzor, and one place has a machzor but no shofar. So the Gemara says, go to hear the shofar. Shkayach, of course. The Gemara says it's pshita. Of course I'm going to go hear the shofar. Because the shofar is daraisa. It's a mitzvah daraisa to fulfill. And the machzor, which has all the malchiyas, sechonos, and shofars, is only derabanan. So that's the Ramban's proof. You see, tefillah is only derabanan. But look at the last part of the Gemara. So the Gemara says, so what was the chiddush? The chiddush was, even when it's a suffix, maybe they'll have a shofar, maybe they won't. I should still go to the city where it has a suffix shofar, even though there's another city which has a vadei machzor.
Where does Rashi do that Gemara?
So we'll have to see. To see how we can explain for Rashi. But that's the proof that Ramban gives. I'll just give you a little hint. Still, if it's the Rabbanan Daraisa, of course, suffix Darabanan, meaning obviously suffix Daraisa l'chumra, you should go hear the shofar. What's the chiddush of the Gemara? So we'll see. But the simple reading, it seems to be the Ramban is saying that it's clear cut, it's the Rabbanan, and Rashi is incorrect. That seems to be, but the Rav Shechter endeavored to explain Rashi. That was Rav Shechter's part of his shir last week. So before we get to Rashi, just to give you some practical takeaways in what the Shulchan Aruch says and what the Poskim say. So the Shulchan Aruch in Tov Kuf Tzadi Sif Aleph, Kama Tikiyos Chayav Adam L'Shmuel B'Rosh Hashanah. How many Tikiyos I have to hear on Rosh Hashanah? Tisha. I have to hear 9. Lefi Shenemar Trua B'Yovel, because it says the word Trua by Yovel, Rosh Hashanah Gimel Pa'amim, and Rosh Hashanah it says the word 3 times. By Yovel, Rosh Hashanah says 3 times. V'chol Trua Pshuta Lefanel Pshuta Lacharel, like we said before. Every Trua has to have its Kiya, which is called a Pshuta. It's a simple blast, one before, one after. Upi Hashamua Lamdu Shechol Truos Shel Chodesh Hashvi Echad Hein Bein Rosh Hashanah Bein Yom Kippur Shel Yovel Tisha Tkiyos. We have a tradition that you have to have these 3 different ways of hearing it: Shvarim or Trua or Shvarim Trua. Therefore, token Tkiyos token B'chol Yom Mishneim Tartat Tarat. And then you have the next one, which is, we'll see, Tashrat, and then Tarat. But I just said, Tarat, Tashrat, and Tashat. True zu amur bator nistapik lanu im hi lila shanu korim trua. We don't know, is the trua really what we call the or maybe it's the shvarim, do, or maybe it's both together. So therefore, because we have this machlokes, we do all 3, and that gets us to the 3 sets of 3. Okay. Now the Aruch HaShulchan in Tov Kuf Tzadi Beis, he says, to address this point, again, like we mentioned, this combination of the tefillos and the tikiyos, he says, token al seder habrachos. You have to blow the shofar according to the ordering of the brachos of the Musaf on Rosh Hashanah. And he actually addresses this question that we asked before. Af al gav d'midin Torah ein hatikiyos inyan lahabrachos. 1 second. What do the tikiyos have to do with the brachos? There's nothing min Torah, nothing to do with that. He says, mitzvah ve'atzmehu. It's mitzvah ve'atzma. It's its own mitzvah. V'gam habrachos ina min Torah. He's taking the side of the Ramban that the brachos are not the midaraisa. It seems to be that would follow that they're separate, 2 separate things. Mikol makom kishetiknu chachamim habrachos tiknu shiyitaku bahen. Once the rabbis established the brachos of the tefillah, which is the Rabbanan, they said you should blow the shofar throughout the davening al seder habrachos. V'dafka, he says this, I'm skipping a few lines. V'dafka b'tzibor. That's when it comes to when you go to shul and you're with a congregation. V'lo b'yachid. The yachid tokia kula tkiyos. The yachid blows them all. V'achachach mispal musaf. If he's by himself, for whatever reason, and he has a shofar, he blows all of them, all before musaf. V'atam nira, what's the reason for this? The Torah, we understand based on our tradition, has to hear the shofar 3 times. Tekiya, trua, tekiya. The 3 different versions, which gets us to 9. Mistama, kiyona, b'shebeseder abrachos. Kivuna. The kavana is shebeseder arishon yikablu ol malchuso k'mo shetoken lefnei hamelech. V'asheni shal zechroni lefnei yitzbarach. The first set is, like we said before, it's Malchios, accepting Hashem's Malchus. The second set is Zichronos. As we know, it's Hashem should remember us. And then the last one is Shofros. V'hashlishi l'shmoa kol shofar k'mo shehaya b'matan Torah, like they had it at Matan Torah. V'lachein tiknu seder atikiyos al habrachos ha'elu. That's all when it comes to the Rabim. I'm Indian gezehu rak the Rabim. Tizchus harabim godol mi'od v'lo b'yachid. V'lochein ha'yachid inu tokia al seder brachos. What's the Aruch HaShulchan saying? He's explaining our practice today. Our practice today is, according to the way he understands it, is that the tzibor, according to Chazal, we split it up into these 3 themes of the shofar: Malchios, Zechronot, and Shofros. But that's only for the tzibor. That's only for the congregation. That's what the Chazal made their enactment. They said in shul, this is how you do it. But when you're alone, then it seems to be you would do the mitzvah all at once. You have a chiyuv to do it. You do it all at once, and then you daven musaf afterwards. And that's in fact how Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky in Kovitz Halachos is quoted as paskening. And that's in fact if someone's homebound. Rabbi Karapkin said this as well. You don't go and daven the musaf with them and you blow. You do 30 blasts all at once, and they're yotze that way, because it's not. It seems to be that the din to have them al seder abrachos was only done for the tzibor. So getting back to the question of Rashi, where did Rashi get this idea that it could be daraisa? So this really comes from Rav Soloveitchik, and Rav Schachter said that Rav Hutner also has the same thing in Pachar Yitzchak, and he said he's not sure. Maybe they learned it together in Berlin. They both were in the same time in University of Berlin. The three great Gedolim who were in University of Berlin. There was Rav Hutner at the same time. There was Rav Hutner, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and Rav Soloveitchik. I once saw a quote attributed to Rav Parnas, who's my father-in-law's Rebbe. Let's see if I can remember it. He said about this 3. He said that Lubavitcher Rebbe left Berlin. He says Rav Hutner graduated, and the Rav was still there. He never left. Just sort of like a interesting. But they, I'm not sure if I'm getting that one right. But either way, the 3 of them were all there at the same time. There's fascinating stories about them being in Berlin. At one time, again, I can't verify this, but I saw this printed somewhere. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, I think it was on Purim. I think he got up and made a l'chaim or something. You have to remember what Berlin was like. This is before the war. This was like in the 20s or the 30s. It was super secular. There was no, you can't publicly be, they didn't, I don't even know if there were their kippahs out. And he did something, I think it was Purim, he was reading Megillah, I don't remember, he did something publicly Jewish observant, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It wasn't the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So they put him in jail. They put him in, maybe it was the university jail or whatever, they locked him up. And Rav Soloveitchik had to go and bail him out and get money or speak to him or whatever it was. He had to advocate on his behalf. So then the story goes that after he left, he said, now you could really be a Rebbe. Because all the Lubavitcher Rebbes all went to jail. So even then, he knew. He was married to the daughter of the Rebbe. He was the Rebbe was the son-in-law, but he was not yet the Rebbe till 1959, it was, 58, 57, I don't remember. Okay, So explaining Rashi, the Rav, who also, as I said before, Rav Soloveitchik and Rav Hutner said the same thing, said the follows. This is quoted in Be'ikvei Hatzon. Rav Shechter often will give a shir and he'll say his own Torah, but this is all his Torah from the Rav. He said something fascinating. He says on source number 11, he also, at the time he said this, he quoted it from the Sefer, we call it the Kapos Tamar, but it was really the Sefer that Rav Moshe Ibn Chaviv had on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim, which it's called Tosefes Yom Kippurim, and he explains that Malchios and Shofros, the Malchios, Sechonos, and Shofros, he says as follows. Tekios hachatzotros shebetainios v'tekios hashofar sheberosh Hashanah einam l'shem shira v'nigun. It's not just for shira and nigun. Ella l'chazek es hatfila ulalosel l'dargaz zaka. It's to take our tfilos and to strengthen them and to give them bechinas. He says bechinas tefillah sheishimon demos. What did we say in the beginning? He started off with this pasuk. The pasuk said after bechor b'meis hamikdash gam ki ezak v'shavia sasam tefilasi. My tefillos have become muted, have become ineffective. Well, how do we get back the tefillah? By shari demos, by the gates of the tears. So when we link the shofar with the tefillah, according to Rav Soloveitchik, we're turning the tefillah into shari demos. We're turning the shofar, which is a cry, we're bringing it together with the tefillah, and when we transition the tefillah into shari demos. And that's what he says. Shemiyom shachar beis hamikdash ninalu shari tefillah ach shari demos lo ninalu. I'm not sure. Valhachi perusho, al kain perusho, something like that. Yom trua yelachem ba targum yom yivava. It's a day of crying, and that's yivava bechia. Umiati yishloma de beis hamikdash ulo rak makom hakarbonas. Hakrovas hakarbonas elga makom matfilos. The Beis Hamikdash is not just for karbonas; it's for tefillah. And when we take the shofar and we bring it together with the tefillah, like he says a little bit later, he says lefika chudamer hakasud de b'mikdash hu ikerd makom tefillah b'chol makom sheish chatzotzra. When you have the blast of the chatzotzros, kedei lechazik as hatefillah yesh lahosif gam shofar ima. You would add a shofar with the chatzotzros. That's a shtickle over there about the chatzotzros. The point that he made, that the Rav said, and Rav Shechter is quoting it in his name, is that Rashi is saying that it is at the deraisa level, because when you take the tefillos and you bring the shofar together with it, it transitions the tefillos from just being derabanan into being deraisa, because it becomes shari demos, it becomes shalom nalu. It makes the tefillos into a cry, and that cry brings us back to the level of the Beis Hamikdash, brings us back to the level of our tefillos going straight into Shemayim.
Is there a thing that you're not supposed to cry on Rosh Hashanah? If it's a Yom Tov?
You're not supposed to what?
Cry?
I wrote about this in the Yom Noraim magazine. It's an article called "Crying on Rosh Hashanah." I think it's did I put it there on this? I don't think I did this year. I think we have talked about it last year. Arizal says if you don't cry, there's something wrong with you. Arizal says that, but the Vilna Gaon says you shouldn't cry. So, in short, Rav Moshe Sternbuch says there's two kinds of cries. One is a cry of despair, and one is the cries of tefillos. Crying of tefillos is, of course, we should do. There's nothing greater. But the crying of despair, we shouldn't do. That's what Moshe Sternbuch.
That's the first thing that you said. That has to do with
well, the cry is the shofar. The shofar is our cry. That's, you could argue that doesn't mean we should cry with our tears, but but you could say, what do you mean? There's nothing greater. So
There's a cry of happiness.
there's also tears of joy. Right.
Very common.
Yes. Yeah. Rav Shechter, when he was talking, giving a shir, he would also just start crying. He was talking about Rav Elyashiv and different things. He's crying. Okay, I think I already covered the Simanim. Should we still do it?
The what?
The idea of the Simanim? The prayer, the wordless prayer? Remember I spoke about that? Should we do it again?
Yeah.
Should do it again. Okay. So that's the Tkios. The Tkios according to Rashi.
Are you recording? Yes,
Okay, fine. So the bottom line is, as an individual.
Where's the
Oh, I put it on. YU Torah sometimes, I don't know, different places. Or I put on the YouTube, by YouTube, by a Torah, something it's called. Could try. So that's the bottom line there. The Yachid, according to Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, the way we paskin here is the 30 blasts, but the Tzibor has this idea. It seems to be that the Aruch HaShulchan says, it doesn't seem to be. He says it's D'Rabbanan, but perhaps we could explain Rashi as the Rav is explaining that it elevates the tefillos when you have the cry of the shofar and you mix them together, and it elevates the tefillos to a shari demos lo ninalu, that we cry throughout the tefillos with the cry of the shofar. And that's why we do al seder habrachos, which it can be an alternative explanation why we have so many shofar blasts on Rosh Hashanah. Some say, right, Rabbeinu Tam, Tosfos quotes it, that it's from Aim Sisra, but it may not be. That's not the only explanation. Maybe we have more than just 30 because we want to break it. We want to do break it up through the Seder Brachos. The Seder Brachos have the 3 sets.
Actually, interesting. By Slichos, by the Spartan, Hashem Kabbalah V'Chanun, they're always blowing the shofar at the same time. So you got your tefillah going up with.
So it's the same idea, right? If the shofar is the cry of tefillah, then we should bring it into our tefillos, right? Yeah. So I mentioned this in short in the Dvar Halacha in the morning after the minyan, but I think it'd be a good idea to go over a little bit as well. We have the next topic for today is the meal of Rosh Hashanah. There's certain minhagim at the meal of Rosh Hashanah. Some have new fruit. Some put out these different things called Simanim. So just to clarify, the new fruit we should put out the second night, not the first night, because there's a question that we're trying to address when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, and that is the Shehechiyanu, whether we're supposed to make a Shehechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah. Now, there's a reason why it's a suffix, it's a question, and that is, I had it on the source sheet. Oh, it's later on in the source sheet. Sorry. Source number 17. Source number 17, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, and also the Gemara in Beitza references this, that the day of Rosh Hashanah is a Yom HaRichta. It's one long day. And if it's one long day, so then it's potentially, there's no reason to make a Shehechiyanu on the second day. The reason why we make a Shehechiyanu on the second day of Yom Tovim is because in Yom Tov Sheni Shel Goliath, we made it, the second day is modeled after the same as the first day. However, Rosh Hashanah is considered potentially one long day. The reason for this is that Rosh Hashanah was declared by witnesses. They had to say when they saw the moon. And if no witnesses came on the 30th day of Elul, then we said the next day is automatically Rosh Hashanah. But there are cases the Gemara talks about this, that there was one year where the witnesses came very late, and because they were late, they were not able to say the Shir Shel Yom properly on Rosh Hashanah, and because of this, the rabbis instituted that the 30th day of Rosh Hashanah would always be Rosh Hashanah, whether there were witnesses or not, and that's historically how the day of Rosh Hashanah became observed as 2 days. Nowadays, although the new moon is not established based on witnesses, but we still continue the observances of Rosh Hashanah as 2 days. The Gemara in Beitza calls this Kedusha Arichta or Yom Arichta. It's one elongated day. And the question was actually posed to Rashi. Rashi was asked this question: should we make a Shehechiyanu on the second day of Rosh Hashanah? He has a very interesting tshuva. Take a look at your source sheet. I think it's source number 18. Shelos Tshuvas Rashi, Siman Kuf Tez Zayin. He says that yes, you should make a Shehechiyanu. Patzkins, you should make a Shehechiyanu. He has a very interesting svara why you should do that. That the second day is really the Iker day, but not to get into that for now. It's just a little bit complicated for now. But the point is that the day of Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah could potentially be one long day. So it's a machlokes if we should make a Shehechiyanu. We paskin that you do make a Shehechiyanu on the second day. As you see the Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim Simin Taf Reish. B'kiddush Leil Sheni, he says, Yilavish Beged Chadash Ominiach Pri Chadash, for Omrim Shehechiyanu, that you put out a new fruit to cover yourself. You're not sure, should you make a shechianu or not? So even though we paskin, you do say a shechianu, but to cover our bases, we also want to make sure that we have something there on the second night to make a shechianu on, which would be a new fruit or a new beged. But important to note, v'im ein matzoi beged chadash or pi chadash, im kol zeh yomar shechianu. You still make a shechianu like we said in Rashi, like we paskin halacha l'maisa, but you put out a new fruit the second night. So just to be clear, as the Mishnah Berurah writes, this is to solve the suffix of whether you make a shechianu on the second night. But this has nothing to do with simanim. Simanim are not necessarily new fruits, and some people have a minhag, as is discussed in the Max Home, whether we should do it 1 or 2 days, but people have a minhag to put out new fruits the first night of Rosh Hashanah or even the second night, but the second night has to have the new fruit, or whatever. We said before it doesn't have to, but that's the practice. You should have it there. If you don't have it, you still make a shechianu. So where did the simanim come from? Where does this practice come from? It's actually called...
We're saying shechianu on both nights, right?
The first night, there's no question. Of course you make a shechianu.
And I'm saying the second night, they're still making a lighting.
Who?
Still making a shechianu.
Women.
Yeah.
Oh, in the candle lighting. Yeah.
I say, sorry, the women, you should have like the fruit day as well. While
Yeah,
they do it,
yeah.
it's kavoda for later,
Right.
so then it's...
Yes.
which is-
True. If they're making a shechianu, they'll have in mind to make shechianu on the new fruit as well to cover their bases. But again,
What about first night?
first night there's no issue. There's no issue.
Because
There's no issue. The first night is that
because saying shechianu in lighting candles is a problem, right? On the second night, because it's a suffix, right?
right.
Right, so you should have the fruit there as well.
Some of them don't say shechianu. Some it's a different minhagim. Some people follow wait till they hear it in
But
kiddush.
then-
They wait till they hear it in kiddush. Some of them.
Oh, right, okay.
But
Hmm.
I believe my wife says shechianu, usually in shul, but I think she says shechianu in lighting. So the Gemara in Horius, if you're learning Daf Yomi, it actually brings up the Simanim. It's not just a nice modern day minhag. It actually comes up in the Gemara itself. It says Hashda Amrit Simanam Nilsa Gemara in Horius Daf Yud Beis. Since now we're saying that it's a thing to have these Simanim, the Rabbi says La'olam Yeragil Lemechse Bereish Shata Karav Rubia. A person should always be accustomed to seeing these things on Rosh Hashanah. He highlights seeing it. He actually doesn't say you have to eat it. You should see it. He doesn't mention anything to do with the hiratzons, but he says you should see the kara, berubia, squash or fenugreek, karse, leeks, vasilka, vitamre, chard. I don't know what chard is, and dates. So this practice is actually codified in the Shulchan Aruch as well. Taf Kuf Pei Gimel Sif Aleph. You Adam Ragil Le'achol Rosh Hashanah Rubia. You should always on Rosh Hashanah have Rubia. Dahainu Tlasin Karte Silka Timre Kara Uchashiacha Rubia. He says when you eat the Rubia, Yeomar Yiratzon Shirbu Zichuyosenu Karsi is Yichasu Sonenu or Yikarsu Sonenu. Timre is Yitamu Sonenu. He quotes all those different Yiratzons. So the question really begs to be asked. We don't believe in omens. We don't believe in superstitious things. What exactly are we? We don't say, well, you eat this thing. Oh, that's a good sign. You wear this red bracelet. Oh, you'll be. We don't believe in that. So what, in fact, are we supposed to be understanding from this practice, which goes back all the way to the Gemara? So there's a few explanations. I think we've done this in the past, but I'll just share with you two explanations. The Maharsha says this is not a problem of divination, of nichush, because if you see, the Gemara doesn't say anything about bad signs. It just says good signs. It's a one-way sign, a one-way omen. A one-way omen, the Maharsha says, is not a problem. It's only a positive thing. He says, the mash yitol adam atbul l'simin tov milsehi ve'ein bo mishum nichush.
Sorry.
It's only a one-way simin. If there's the Gemara talks about nichush as, let's say I say like this, I'm going to shoot an arrow. If the arrow falls on this side, then I'll go there. If the arrow goes on that side, I'll go there. That you have two options. You don't know what to do, and you're letting this superstition dictate what you're going to do. This is different. This is, you want to have a good year, eat this thing. There's no like, well, if I eat it if I eat this and I feel this way, then I'll do. No, it's just a one-way sign. That's the Maharsha says. It's not a problem of nichush. Nichush is sort of like a two-way, in a fork in the road. I have to do some sign. If a black cat goes this way or a black cat this, right? It's determining the way in which I live. This is not determining the way in which I live. I'm just saying this should be a good thing. It's a good segula, whatever you want to call it. It's a thing. That's the Maharsha's explanation. But I saw, and I mentioned this before, it's my favorite explanation that I found so far, and this is the Bnei Yissaschar in the name of the Maggid of Mezrich. This, I feel, is a very, very beautiful explanation. He says, source number 15, the Bnei Yissaschar, in Tishrei Maimer Beis Os Yud, he says that the creation of the world was created in 10 mamars, 10 utterances. But he says, the Gemara asks the question, if you look at the beginning of Sefer Bereshis and in the beginning of the creation story, it only says, Vayomer 9 times. So the Gemara answers, the first Bereshis, Na'ami Maimer. I don't know why there's so many chichiks over the letters over there. You see there's like these 2 dots there. I don't know why, but the Bereshis Na'ami Maimer. Bereshis is also a Maimer. So he says, Hikshu lama lo nemar vayomer kamo be'eincha. The rest of them have the word vayomer, but Bereshis bara doesn't say vayomer Bereshis bara. It just says Bereshis bara. V'hizbar Rav HaKadosh Hanal. This is what Rav calls him Rav HaKadosh, Rav Dov Ber, which is the Maggid of Mezrich, Rav Dov Ber of Mezrich. He says the Rav explained. Rav HaKadosh says, Hine ha-maimer lo yitzuyur lanu ki'im al yidei osios. A mimer can only come through letters. V'hine osios gam kim nivro. The letters themselves have to be created. Ki mehicha nishavu. How could they have been brought out into the world? Alo ha antbas or asbas. I guess that's like a aleph base. Asbas, asba. I think it means aleph base. Hu barom malcolm v'adonam. So you had to create the osios. I don't know if this is a Kabbalistic thing, but you had to create the osios to bring that out, the utterances. V'hine osios nivro kodem. Therefore, the osios had to be created first. Then the giloi, the revelation of the utterances, could be revealed, and that's what he writes as a proof to this. That it says Teisha Namar Vayomer. Only 9 times it says Vayomer. Mashenkim Bebriya Rishona, the original creation, Namar Bereshis Bara Elokim Es. That's where the first creation it just says Aleph Taf. What is Aleph Taf? Hainu Haosios. Min Aleph Ad Taf. And therefore, V'efshar Likasiv, you couldn't write Vayomer because it didn't have. There was no letters to write. There were no utterances yet. Hashem first had to create Bereshis Bara Elokim Es. Hashem had to create S. What's S? He created the letters Osios, Aleph through Taf. Then he says down at the bottom, I bolded it. He says,
where you said Ha'aspa, that's
yeah.
Ha'ace with the summer. He's writing it like in, that's how he wrote it, not with the Taf.
Oh.
Ha'ace.
What's the Beis Hey then? Baruch Hu maybe?
Yeah, Ha'ace.
I don't know, Hashem? I'm not sure what that I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure what that is.
But it means ace. I'm sure this says ace.
It could be.
Yeah.
I don't know. Later he says. Later he says that Aleph Taf is Osios. Yeah. That's what he says. Hainu the Amrit Simanim Milsa, the bottom, the bolded part of the bottom. He says that's why Rabbi says to have the Simanim out on Rosh Hashanah, because he says that's Hascholas B'rias Ha'olam. That's the beginning of the world's creation. That Rosh Hashanah was Hayom Haras Olam. Therefore, Tov Ma'olim the Mitakanas Hadinim Aidi Simin. That's why it's so great, it's so important to have the Simanim of the Simanim at Rosh Hashanah. Min Simin Bali De Dibor. And comes that the Simanim are the step before Dibor. And that's why he says also the Shofar, Tkiya Shofar Mibli Dibor, Rak B'kol Lishma Kol Shofar. We say we hear the Shofar. The Shofar is a wordless prayer. So we have 2 wordless prayers on Rosh Hashanah. One is the shofar, and the other is the simanim. That's what he says. The simanim are the step before the maimarim, the step before the osios, because it's a wordless prayer. We eat the food Abai doesn't even say you eat it. Abai just says you look at it. But we have the practice of eating it, and it's a wordless prayer that we go back in time to the creation of the world, and we have the Simanim, which are even you look at them or you eat them, which is without any prayer, and you could, if you're saying this over in a shorter slot, you could say there are many things we daven for. But we don't always know what to daven for, so we just ask Hashem. Without words, we just say, Hashem, give us a happy year. You know what that means. Give us a sweet year. You know what that means. We don't know we don't even know all the specific things we need to daven for. So we just eat the simanim as if to say, Hashem, you know what we need. This is what we're gonna go back to in a certain sense, a more premortal or essential type of experience.
It's fascinating. It's all about destroying our enemies. Every single one.
That's what the hiratzons are, but this is not. There's no hiratzons here.
I know that.
Or shir b'zichio seinu karimon.
Eating that's what that statement is coming into the world. No, when you eat Israel,
Maybe I don't know. I'm not sure.
Israeli, after you've eaten Israeli,
Right.
putting it into
Bringing it to that next step.
Into
Yes.
finite terms.
Right.
To that,
Sure.
but why is it all?
It's not all, but there are a lot of them. No, there's not all.
Some of the values here, it's hard. Increase the mitzvah.
Shir b'zichio seinu karimon. We should have our. Then we have
But a lot of them.
Shana Tova Umisuka.
The majority are there.
I would say the majority are about the enemies. I don't know. Listen, I don't know the history of where they.
Face it was right in the beginning of time. That's it. Look at us today. That's what it is.
We had enemies even back then.
No, it's there for a
Right.
reason. It's to wake
Right.
us up.
Right.
Waking us up.
Got to keep on the game. You know there are people out there. Right. Okay. Let's see. Oh boy, it's late. Should we do sleeping on Rosh Hashanah just quickly, or you want to get going?
Sleeping?
The
No,
topic
we're
of
not doing that
sleeping.
No, we're not doing
Oh no,
that.
I have some kulas. Some
It's
kulas.
the showering one. I'm not interested.
No, we have
don't
some
do
kulas
that.
for you.
Okay, kulas. Go.
You're okay with some
I put it on the
kulas?
playlist. I'm not
I need that.
You need some kulas.
No.
I don't know. Listen, what you don't know doesn't hurt. I don't know. But okay, so just bottom line. Okay, so that's the little nice idea of the simanim shachianu. Okay, there is a concept which is thrown around and bantered a lot about, which is on Rosh Hashanah you shouldn't go to sleep, because if you go to sleep you'll have a sleepy year. Okay, so let's just take a look at what the source is in. This is I just took this from Kovitz Halachos, Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, source number 16. Nogin shalolishim Rosh Hashanah b'yom. We have a practice not to go to sleep on Rosh Hashanah during the day. U'b'yom sheni yishmakim lahakel. On the second day, there's room to be makel. Where does this come from? So I have to go back to the sources. In Aleph, he quotes from the Ramah. The Ramah writes that it's a minhag not to sleep on the day of Rosh Hashanah, and that's a good minhag. It's a good minhag. And Rav Shmuel said the simple reading of the Ramah and the other poskim is that seems to be on both days of Rosh Hashanah. However, the Aruch HaShulchan writes it seems to be only on the Yom Rishon. Now, look at this next line. Ofen ikar akpeda hu bizman tefillah v'tikiyah shofar. The main part of the time of the day you're not supposed to sleep is during the morning, during the time of tefillah and the time of shofar. We said before, the tefillah and the shofar is the time to cry, is the time to get to that level of shar demos, lo ninalu, that Hashem will never close the doors to our tefillos if we're crying. Tahainu kodem chatzos hayom. That's before chatzos. I think those people, in those days, they didn't have such long davenings, or maybe they started early. Aval acher chatzos leika kol kach peda v'yachal ishanhu imhu ayif. If you're tired, after chatzos, you go to sleep. Where does he get that from?
This is on day one.
This is even on day one. Where does he get this from? It comes from an Arizal. Look at the Arizal. The Arizal says, listen, you hold by the Arizal there. The Arizal says, Amr she'achar chatzos mutar lishon. You could go to sleep after chatzos. Why? Shekfar nisorer hamalech al yedei hatkiyos v'atfilos. The malach was already. I'm reading from the letter Beis on the bottom of source number 16. In Kovitz Halachos, letter Beis. It's the small letter Beis. He says the malach was already awakened with the tchios and the tfilos. That's the kula. But then comes along the Mata Ephraim, And he says, one second. The Arizal was a holy man. He says, Halavai, we should be like the Arizal sleeping when we're awake. Right? He's like, the Arizal was, okay, the Arizal says he could go to sleep because after he already, but if Halavai, we should accomplish what the Arizal accomplished when he was awake, then we could maybe go to sleep. But he says it's better to not go to sleep. But, and it's a minhag nachon, the Rabbi says, not to go to sleep. But the Magen Avram does cite the Arizal, and that's in fact, I think, this is what I saw today this morning. Rabbi Ari Marcus, the Rosh Hashiva in Reshit, he just says that seems to be the way that we paskin, that after, however, the Mishnah Berurah quotes Arizal saying that after midday, one is allowed to sleep because the angel is already aroused by the Tefillah, and this indeed how we, by the Tefillah and the Shofar, and this is indeed how we hold. Just to, I guess, temper that somewhat, Rav Shmuel does say that if you're going to sleep just because you want to enjoy yourself to sleep, that's not a good enough reason. This is Rosh Hashanah, this is Yom Adin. But if you're really mamish tired, then it's okay to go to sleep. Something also to bear in mind, and he says this explicitly, the poskim say this, quotes it from the Magen Avram, person who sits doing nothing is Yoshevu Batel, it's as if he's sleeping. It's like if you're sitting there doing nothing, that's as if you're sleeping. So you might as well go to sleep, which is actually giving you more koach for the next day or whatever. You shouldn't prepare for the next day, but it's giving you some koach instead of just sitting there doing nothing. If a person is going to learn something, a person is going to learn a little mishnayos, and he starts to doze off, and then he goes to sleep, that's not a problem. But just to go and to say, I'm going to sit there doing nothing, that's no good. And if you're just going to go ahead and take a nap because you have nothing better to do, maybe take out a book, maybe take out some sefer. But he says if you're tired, after chatzos, you can go to sleep. If you can learn a little bit, noch besser, it's even better. But to sit and do nothing, because this is what people say, oh, you can't go to sleep, so let's just play board games and speak Lashon Hara and what. No, that's even worse. So there's priorities of levels of priorities here. Doing nothing, he says, is like as if sleeping, except you're not getting any energy in your body. And learning Torah is obviously best, but if you're feeling tired, after chatzos, the ikar halacha is you can go to sleep. And even the Aruch HaShulchan said this whole topic is only day one, even though the Ramah seems to say even day two. But if we're going for what's practical, I would suggest maybe learn a little bit after the suit if you can. But again, like you said, the ikar halacha is that you could go to sleep, and the main time is not to go to sleep in the morning. Rav Shlomo Zalman asked the question, well, how could you go to sleep at all? Then you have a minyan at 8 o'clock, or you have a minyan at 7 or 9 o'clock. How can you be sleeping? That you're sleeping the day of Rosh Hashanah. So he says, no, that's a continuation of the last night's sleep. It's not sleeping during the day. So once you're up in the morning until chatzos, that's the ikar time, not to fall asleep. So try to stay awake during davening. That's the main avoda. That's the main avoda. And if we could do that, we should be zocha to Gemar Chasim Tova, Kugam and Shiyar. Everyone have a wonderful day, a week, and a wonderful year.